this is John from Freedom Force Talk Squad. Thanks for stopping by. We are here at the massively upgraded Freedom Force Studios to provide you a little entertainment about freedom. So in this case, in our discussion of freedom, we're going to talk about the transmission of culture as I personally experienced it in my favorite musical art genre, that is music. Okay, so how did it start? My dad played guitar. He liked country music. He liked Hank Williams and Merle Haggard, great musicians. I always thought there'd be something more talking to me because I was born in the era of electricity. My dad rode to school on a horse till he was 14 and ran away. And I took a bus, so I had a different experience that I was living through in my childhood. And one day when I was 11, a guy said to me, we're gonna go over to Dude's house. This is in Castlegar, BC. We're gonna go over to Dude's house and he's got a beer and we're gonna listen to these records. I was like, this sounds awesome. Okay, so we go over there and we're like splitting this beer. It was disgusting. And we listened to two albums, Led Zeppelin 2 and Rush Moving Pictures. And it was so much fun to be there with dudes having a drink and listening to music and talking about the music. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed it. And then when I went to school, I was walking around bringing up these bands, and it was like a way of I didn't realize that you could create connections by talking about this stuff. It was so interesting. And so it moved along so that people would start to say back to me, as I got older, like I got introduced to fans of bands like Van Halen and AC/DC, and that was really cool. It was electric, loud, dumb, repetitive, anthemic, magnificent, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. And at the same time, I knew this guy. And these are in small towns in the Kootenays, BC. And at this point, we're talking about Castlegar, and I'm about 13, and so that would be about 1980, 81. And this guy said, hey, I want you to hear this album I have. And this is a guy who broke into houses and sold drugs, and he was like my age. And he got me into Jim Carroll. Jim Carroll, who his big hit was People Who Died in the 80s. But if you get a chance, he's like a Velvet Underground alternative, very New York, very heroin, but he put out 3 albums of really memorable material. He was a poet, and the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Basketball Diaries, was about him. And this represented a window into an entire different world that got backed up all of a sudden by a mainstreaming of a kind of a dirty post-punk pop movement, where we heard, when I was 14, Romeo Void, whose great hit was Never Say Never. I might like you better if we slept together. I might like you better if we slept together. There's something in your eyes that says maybe. That's Never Say Never. Saxophone. Ba, 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 ba. And it was such a great counterbalance to like what our parents liked, which was like ABBA and Bob Seger. And so as time went on, there was the influence of jazz. I started getting really interested in playing bass guitar, and I started really loving Jaco Pastorius. It got me into Weather Report. That got me into John Coltrane and Frank Zappa and Charles Mingus. And then when I was in Calgary, at this point, I'm a full-on Iron Maiden, Judas Priest guy. Those are my 2 main ensembles. Those are the guys that I love. And then these dudes at school, as I was starting grade 12, said, hey, if you like that stuff, listen to this song. And the song I listened to was Chemical Warfare by the Dead Kennedys. And everything changed. So now, bear in mind, this is like my first day of grade 12. Bear in mind everything that I've told you so far. I could go on up until like now. Like I'm describing right now when I was 17. I'm 51. I could go on with this story, and what I've described to you is a musical journey, or like a sliver of it, from like a kind of its inception of independence, going on to a certain point in living my first city, which was Calgary, starting grade 12, and these guys say, "Hey, I put this on," and I'm just like, oh, and I forgot, back in grade 9, I got also turned on to Alison Moyet's electro R&B project. Upstairs at Eric's was their album, but the name will come to me in a minute. The thing is, all of this stuff, this is culture. This is us talking to each other. This is, I can look at people I consider my enemy and say like, yeah, that guy likes the books. That's good. I like the books. But you can't be all bad if you like the books. It's true. Yeah, and I want us to remember that in a culture war, the migration of culture is a thing that is a undercurrent community and an upper current community. That is to say, these are bands that exist they're not like hidden by any alternate agenda or anything like that. And but there's a lot of them, and not everyone's interested in music. So if you're interested in music, there's this group, but there's all these genres, and some people like this and some people like that. Some people don't like this, and some people, well, most people are kind of ambivalent. And yet, culture slides among us through tiny conversations about things we recognize. In this case, because we're talking about music, it's sound. So like, hey, if you notice that someone who doesn't love music, it's hard for them to tell the difference between AC/DC and the Ramones. Not post Bon Scott, but because the production's too good. But like the awesome early stuff with Bon Scott, because it's so primitive, because it's so brusque. Someone who doesn't care about music that much, to them it sounds kind of the same, even though they have very different, Australia, New York, bar rock, art punk, because Arturo Vega was backing a lot of the ideas of the Ramones. So, and yeah, it just sounds like the same to most people, but for the people who hear the difference, there's a kinship born there. These are good things. These are very unstabby things. These are the kind of conversations that don't lead to war. And which is in itself an extremely, I think, powerful argument for culture. And the culture has to be very singular to you. You have to have your sense of the art you like. Even if you're not even that interested in culture, like being able to discuss it a little bit, it can be huge, whether it's literature or music, visual art, what's left of it. Of course, films suck now. Video games, that is by far the most vibrant cultural outlet in the world. Novels are hanging on. So remember that culture is proof of what makes the West so great. It's not saying other cultures suck, it's saying the West is great. And you should subscribe to the Freedom Force Talk Squad, because we want to tell you what makes you great at expense to no one, and that you are freer than you think. Have a good one. Cheers.